95% of all prostate cancers are adenocarcinomas. An adenocarcinoma is a cancer that forms from the epithelial cells of a glandular tissue. What does all that mean? Well, if we have a look at the prostate gland down the microscope and we look at the cells, we can look at exactly what that means, and we can compare prostate cancers with benign prostatic hyperplasia and other bits and bobs. I've got two slides actually. I've got there's the prostate gland. It looks like an old slide, but it's got some nice colour on it. We can see a cut edge there, can't we? We can see a corner. So that looks like it's been cut from a prostate. It's not an entire prostate. And I have this tissue. This is a seminal vesicle. That looks like it's got more space inside it, doesn't it? We can also see an angle and a bit of a corner to it. So this is a cut piece of a seminal vesicle. We'll look at the prostate first because, well, prostate cancers and growths and stuff, right? And we'll look at the seminal vesicles as well because these are glands of the male reproductive system. These are glands that produce semen, the fluid that is added to spermatozoa to support the spermatozoa and increase the chances of fertilization. So we should look at them together, right? And we can also compare what we see down the microscope, right? Oh, I've also got a model. So here's a model. There's the bladder. There's the prostate. So the prostate sits inferior to the bladder. It's in quite a refined space, quite a constricted space. I've talked about this before elsewhere. The thing I wanted to point out is that we can see the urethra running from the bladder through the prostate, and that's obviously going to go out through the penis. And then we can also see the ejaculatory duct here. There's the seminal vesicle on the posterior part of the bladder there. And that is going to duct into the ductus deferens, so mix the components of the seminal vesicles with the spermatozoa as they pass in. This all happens during ejaculation, and there's that gets passed in from both sides into the urethra. So we're looking at this tissue when we look at the prostate, but we're going to be looking out for the urethra because hopefully the urethra is going to be in there somewhere, right? Okay, the prostate, of course, is it's infamous for growing later in life. What is growth? Well, a tissue is made up of cells and the tissue that the cells make. And growth can occur by making more cells, that's proliferation, by the cells themselves getting bigger, which is hypertrophy of the cells, and by accretion, making more extracellular matrix. The growths that we see in the prostate are largely because of cell proliferation. So the cells that we're going to look at, they divide more. So the balance between cells being removed and new cells being made is upset, and more cells are being made. So benign growth, benign prostatic hyperplasia, benign growth of the prostate glands, one of those things that probably occurs over a very long time. It seems to occur in that part of the prostate around the urethra, so in the central and transitional zones. We'll have a look at the cells that cause that. So as it grows, and as there isn't a lot of space down here, the benign prostatic growth, the benign prostatic hyperplasia, tends to squeeze the urethra, which makes it harder to pass urine through the urethra, and also might push up into the bladder. And right there you've got the internal urethral sphincters. That might make it difficult to actually open the internal urethral sphincter properly to properly empty the bladder and fully empty the bladder, and pushing on that sphincter can give a sensation of urgency. Whereas prostate cancer, the cells we're going to look at here, we tend to see prostate cancers first form in the periphery, around the outside of the prostate, which means they don't give the same symptoms. They often don't squash the urethra, often don't affect the urinary stream. But prostate cancers are dangerous because they can spread from the prostate to elsewhere in the body, and they do particularly well in bone, and they'll spread to lymph nodes as well through the lymphatic system. So they're really, really dangerous, and often the first thing you know about prostate cancer is bone pain. Okay, right, let's have a look, shall we? we are looking for very similar things to what we have seen when we've been looking at other tubes and other bits of the body. How bright's that? A little bit bright, too bad. All right, what can we see? So I'm on my lowest power objective here, the 4 times objective, and then 10 times magnification to my eyes, giving me a total of 40 times magnification to my eyes. And we're seeing a lot of tubes. So that's the glandular tissue that we're looking at there. The glands are branched. The cells are making the secretory products and passing them into the lumen of those glands, of those ducts. And actually, there I can see a boundary between 2 parts of the prostate. So the prostate is separated up into lobules like many glands are. So there's a dividing part there. This is the outer part of the gland here. Oh, okay, that's some very strange looking tissue there. What's that? Should we, just for fun, jump down, bump, bump. What are those cells? Any ideas? Great big cells. Look how much bigger they are than the cells in the prostate. Those are neurons. This is a parasympathetic ganglion. When we talk about the anatomy here, we talk about innervation and nerves and parasympathetic stuff. Anyway, I'm not going to look at those too much because we'll get way off topic. But yeah, look. Parasympathetic ganglion, neuron cell bodies. Anyway, so most of the pancreas is made up of this very glandular looking tissue. Great. Glandular, glandular, glandular. Look, there's that cut edge there. Oh, and that's a different tube there. And then, that's a different tube there too. So like I said, we expect to find a couple of big tubes inside the prostate, the urethra and the ejaculatory ducts. We need to figure out which is which. But first of all, let's have a look at the glandular tissue. Okay, well actually no, let's look at what we're seeing here is this is what the prostate's made up of. It's made up of glandular tissue making the secretions that are going to be passed into the urethra during ejaculation, and it's made up of muscular tissue. There's smooth muscle in here and there's quite a bit of elastin. So during ejaculation this smooth muscle can contract, squeeze the contents of those glands into the urethra. There are lots of little ducts into the urethra, and off and out it goes and mixes with the spermatozoa. In fact, because the urethra passes through, the smooth muscle can kind of affect the shape of the prostate depending upon whether urination, micturition, whether urine is passing through or whether ejaculate is passing through. So as we see in most parts of the body, smooth muscle is very much an important building block, an important structural element, but it does squeeze the contents out of the gland. So we'll have a look at that in a moment. That will be smooth muscle. Let's jump down. That's my 10 times objective, and we're seeing some lovely epithelia in there, and all of this is smooth muscle. Oh, that's very tidy, isn't it? Look at that. Oh, that's beautiful. Jump up again. So this is what we mean by the glandular tissue. So what we're looking at there is we're looking at an epithelium, and the cells are taller than they are wide, so it is a columnar epithelium. That there looks like a single layer, but actually there are 2 layers, a bit like what we saw in the epididymis. So this is a columnar epithelium, but it is typically described as a pseudo-stratified columnar epithelium. There is a basal layer of cells, and those will be the progenitor cells, which will always be able to make more epithelial cells so that the epithelium is maintained, and those columnar cells are the secretory cells. It's those columnar epithelial cells that are responsible for adenocarcinoma. One of these cells Is DNA, usually, you know, the DNA is damaged so much that the replication machinery of the cell is not kept in check, and the cell will divide and divide and divide and divide and divide. So that's what we mean by an adenocarcinoma. Do you see how we've got these? Oh, they do look good, don't they? So those tall cells are the secretory cells making the components of the semen, which I've talked about elsewhere, and then we can see some cells underneath them, if you like, rounder cells, and those are the basement. Those are the basal cells up against. Well, all of those cells are attached to the basement membrane, which is why it gets called pseudostratified, because it looks like multiple layers, but actually they're all attached to the basement membrane, but they're kind of squished together. And if we look through most of the gland, we just see repeating patterns of this wherever we look. That's pretty, isn't it? So these are branched glands, which is why we see the folds. There's lots of surface area. These cells are working very hard, making lots of secretions ready for ejaculation. And it's a really, really important process, because this stuff is really important. It's supporting the spermatozoa and maximising the probability of fertilisation. So there are strong evolutionary drivers for this. So that's it in terms of the epithelium. Well, the other cell in here which we might see would be a neuroendocrine cell. And it would look a little bit different. Now the neuroendocrine cells, so neuroendocrine cells are cells producing signals that regulate what the other cells around here are doing. And it's the neuroendocrine cells, I think, that when they form a cancer, they tend to form the very dangerous cancers, the ones that are very hard to treat. I might have missed one. You might have seen it as I was going past. But you can see, you know, there are far fewer of the neuroendocrine cells, evidenced by the fact that I just haven't pointed at one yet, whereas there are lots and lots of columnar epithelial cells, secretory cells. So you can already see in the distribution of the number of cells why a cancer from columnar epithelial cells is more common than a cancer from a neuroendocrine cell. Did you see one that I missed as I was scrolling around? Anywho, slide across and look. What we're looking at here is there's a lamina propria, kind of a connective tissue supporting the epithelia, which is running around all of these tubes and holding it all together. And as we go out here, look at these guys, that looks great. See those wiggly cigar-shaped cells? So those are clearly smooth muscle cells. We can see the nucleus stains nice and dark and purple. The lighter pink is the rest of the cell. And that wiggly cigar shape shows us that we're looking at smooth muscle cells. So there's a lot of smooth muscle and a lot of elastin surrounding all of this. Oh, yes, so benign prostatic hyperplasia then, the benign growth, which cells are responsible for that? It seems all of these cells are. So that slow benign growth, the classic one, which starts to compress the urethra and makes it difficult to go for a wee, and makes you get up in the night for a wee. It's the there are more stromal cells, there are more smooth muscle cells and supporting cells in the, and there are more epithelial cells as well. There's slow growth of all of these cell types. There are more cells, like I say, usually over a long period of time. Benign prostatic hyperplasia does not increase the chance of developing prostate cancer, though, apparently. Okay, so I'm back out to my lowest power. Next challenge. Okay, so we've got this tube, and we've got this tube. Now, which one is the urethra? So the urethra, okay, that's a tube that's carrying urine. That means that it's going to be lined by a urothelium, so a specialized epithelium which looks quite different. It looks like lots and lots of layers of cells. It's a stretchy epithelium, and it's also an epithelium where the cells are very tightly stuck together so that the urine that's being produced by the body doesn't diffuse back into the body. We want to get rid of it. So we're looking for a urothelium. That's going to be our key point. I'm a little bit bemused because if that's the urethra, we saw that the urethra in humans, the prostate gland completely surrounds the urethra, and that's not what we're seeing here. We're seeing a tube there surrounded by lots of smooth muscle, and there's prostate gland over there, but there's not prostate gland there. There's the edge of the tissue. I think I know why that is, but let's have a look, see if this is the urethra. Oh yes. Is that too bright for you? Yeah, look at that. Super wiggly, nice muscular tube again, but it's this epithelium that gives it away. That's quite a different looking epithelium. This is a nice section, it's well stained. It looks like we've got lots of layers there, and often the topmost layer, the cells look domed. This is a urothelium. So yeah, that's a urothelium. So that is the urethra. All right, so the reason it's all the way over here then is this must be a section. Well, it could be a section from a lot of animals, but I don't think it's a cow or a pig or a sheep because it's they would be too big. This is probably a prostate from a rat or a mouse. And other animals actually have prostate glands which have lobes which don't surround the urethra. Humans, thinking about it now, have probably got the prostate glands surrounding the urethra because we've evolved to walk bipedally, which has made a number of changes to our pelvis and has probably put the prostate into a very small position, and that's the situation we've ended up with. Which means, I guess that means that elderly rats and mice don't have to get up for a wee in the middle of the night if they get benign growth of their prostate gland. But that's the urethra. So if I slide across and look at that other tube, I'm going to be confused if that also looks like it's got a urothelium. No, that looks more like the ductus deferens or the epididymis, right? Can you see? That's a good section there, look. That looks like a nice pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Let me pop up to the highest power. Do you believe me? You know, I'm just saying what I see, but that looks like a pseudostratified columnar epithelium. Right, looks like tall cells, quite tightly packed together, less well packed together there. That's maybe a bit clearer, is it? So I think that must be the ejaculatory duct. But the ejaculatory duct is very much like the vas deferens or the ductus deferens. It's lined by a pseudostratified columnar epithelium, whereas so compare that to, whoop, I've lost it, that. That's a urothelium. Pop out to the lowest power just to orient you to where we are. So there's the urethra. We've looked at the, have we looked at the urethra elsewhere? Maybe not. There's the ejaculatory duct. Oh, I think I know what that is as well. And then this is the rest of the prostate gland. Lots of, it just looks very glandular. You know, you get used to looking at these things, you think, oh, that looks really glandular, and it is. And then it's separated up into lobules and surrounded by smooth muscle. That's it, that's the prostate. So I think the histology of the prostate gland is fairly straightforward if you're used to looking at histological tissues. Because of how dangerous prostate cancer is and how common growths of the prostate gland are, there's a lot of work out there about the signalling and the physiology, and there's a lot to read about what the prostate gland does and how it works and stuff. It's very interesting. Seminal vesicles, the other gland that produces semen, the other internal gland of the male reproductive system. What does this look like? There we go. So I think that other tube that we saw on the prostate slide, I said, oh, I think I know what that is. I think that is a duct from the seminal vesicle, because anatomically, of course, you've got the ejaculatory duct, you've got the seminal vesicles duct right nearby. They're going to duct into the urethra. I've no idea what the plane of section was in that section, but do you see how it looks a bit similar to these? This is quite striking, isn't it? So this is the seminal vesicle, does the same job. This gland produces more fluid than the prostate does. They both produce slightly different components of semen, so you kind of need your seminal vesicles and your prostate for fertilization to be really likely. But we're seeing a very similar layout, aren't we? So we're seeing an epithelium there. Kind of looks like islands out into the sea. We're seeing a very big lumen, a large lumen where lots of secretions can be stored. We're seeing a lot of folds to the epithelium, which gives more surface area, so you have more cells to make secretions and to push secretions through their cell membranes, and then they're supported by smooth muscle again and a bit of connective tissue in between. So you see what I mean? That's a really big lumen, isn't it? Let's have a look here. That seems to be quite a nice example. Jump up to the 10 times objective, and well, yeah, we're seeing an epithelium. So do you see how we've got those layers of smooth muscle in between? So again, we were talking. I said in the prostate that I saw those neurons, and those were parasympathetic ganglia. Parasympathetic innervation causes these glands to make secretions. Sympathetic innervation causes the smooth muscle to contract and push the contents of the gland out into the urethra or the ejaculatory duct or whatever. So smooth muscle, and then now what sort of epithelium is this? So again, we've got a secretory epithelium. These are the cells making the components of semen. The cells here, they look like they're in a single layer, and they look shorter. This almost looks like a simple cuboidal epithelium. But actually, again, we do have a basal layer of cells and some secretory cells. Now, if we look elsewhere, do these cells get any taller, I wonder? They look quite cuboidal, don't they? So the epithelium that we see inside the seminal vesicles, yeah, it often gets described as simple. It sometimes gets described as pseudostratified. It sometimes gets described as columnar, and it sometimes gets described as cuboidal. We will only say what we see. And these cells really don't look tall like the previous cells, like the cells in the prostate gland did they? These look quite cuboidal, but it doesn't quite look simple, does it? Doesn't quite look like a single layer. It looks like you've got a couple of layers of cells smushed together there. Hence the confusions of the description. But again, you've got a mucosa because we've got the epithelium, and we've got some supporting lamina propria, and then as we go further out, we see those wiggly cells again, the wiggly nuclei, and quite nicely arranged cells, I think. There's the smooth muscle. Okay, so we've looked at the prostate gland and we've looked at the seminal vesicles, we've looked at the cells. It's the same layout of epithelia supported by a lamina propria and layers of smooth muscle, and we've talked about what those cells do, how they function, how it all works, and now we have a better understanding of what benign prostatic hyperplasia means. Those stromal cells, so those we see more smooth muscle cells and we see more epithelial cells, and we have a better understanding of prostate cancer because we know that an adenocarcinoma is forming from those tall columnar epithelial cells. But we also remember that there are different types of cells in here, so we can get different types of cancers from the same cell, or we can get a different type of cancer from a different type of cell, the neuroendocrine cell. Hopefully by looking at it and actually seeing the cells, it makes it easier to understand and remember all of that. Oh dear, the prostate. Fingers crossed, it won't be a problem. See you next week.